You're listening to the RE Social Podcast with your hosts, Andrew and Vince from OnV Invest. For more information, go to onvinvest.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of RE Social Podcast. And today we have Steve Andrews. How are you, my man?
I'm doing good. How about y'all?
Good, man. We're doing awesome. I talked to Allison and she was saying that, you just wrote a new book. So for listeners who don't know who you are, can you give like a quick 60-second intro?
Absolutely. So name's Stephen Andrews, the author of The New American Dream, just released March the 12th. Already hit #1 bestseller on Amazon in the real estate category. So I had quite a bit of success very early on, very blessed with that, but been in this business 10 years. Started $75,000 in debt, making $45,000 a year. Knew I wanted something more, and I thought back to my time at High Point University, and I took a real estate class there, and I knew that's what I wanted to get into, and didn't really have a lot of money. Used several different creative ways to get in this business, but fast forward the 10 years, a couple hundred rental units later, I loaned money, flip houses. Now I wrote a book and starting to do some business coaching as well with my company called Sorex Consulting. So it's been a wild 10 years.
That's crazy, man. So how does your current portfolio look like?
Yep. So it's pretty diverse. So mainly I have single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and small apartment buildings. I would say 10 units or less. And so it's very diverse. Right here in Central North Carolina, I'm located in 3 different counties where I've kind of clustered these properties together.
And you are running syndications?
No, so everything that I manage and own, or everything that I manage, I own. So I do own a rental management company as well. And so we just manage what we own. Oh,
okay, cool. Sorry, man. I forgot. How many units did you say? I was writing it.
Right at 300.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. So you don't even have partners, JV deals?
No.
Wow.
So I initially got in this business 10 years ago, and then I ended up getting my parents into the business and then got my brother into the business too. So, but we all own our own stuff, but then we come together in the rental management side and have a rental management company that then turns around and manages everything for us.
So you and your family have 300 units, and then you have other units you manage on top of that?
No, so we only manage what we own. So
okay.
Probably together somewhere right around 350 to 400 units all together. And then I particularly own somewhere between 200 to 300.
That's crazy, man. So take us back to, like you said, you were in $75,000 in debt. How many years ago was that?
So that was 10 years ago. So and it really kind of dates back to 2011 when I graduated from High Point University. I got a retail store management job, and I knew I wanted to get into real estate, but just too afraid to take the leap. Anything new in life makes you a little bit scared. And fast forward a couple of years later, right around 2014, 2015, I was talking to my parents about getting in this business, and my dad was like, I know somebody that's been in the business about 25 years and he's had a ton of success, give him a call, maybe he can kind of help guide you. And come to find out, his name was Joel and he's still my mentor to this day. And it was just a match made in heaven. He was wanting to sell off some of his portfolio because he wanted to spend more time with his family, and I wanted to grow. And so it was great. It really was.
So he not only kind of helped coach and mentor you, but also got you your first few deals because he sold them to you?
Yep, that's right. And Then he's the one that really taught me, what a banker relationship should look like, or what the relationship will look like for whoever's financing your deals as well. Because I didn't know any of that stuff. He did tell me, he said, hey, before we really get going, I want you to read a book called Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. It was originally published in the 90s, come back and republished in the 2000s. And it really gave an outline of really how you do this business. If you want to do, single families, if you want to own the properties yourself, which was just so great, really laid a great foundation for it.
I'll let Vince go here in a second, but I'm curious about, so you met this mentor through your father?
Father, yep.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, that's one thing that I wish we would have did a lot more early on was really aggressively seek a great mentor. I'm taking that advice now on everything that I do. And so a lesson for anyone listening is, find those who have, already forged that path and learn how you can give them value. And so how was that way that you were giving him value? Was it, he was just a nice guy, just wanted to help you out because you're a family friend, or?
Well, so he told me, he said, Stephen, I'll be honest with you. He said, over the years, I've had 15, 20 different people come to me and say they want to learn how to get in this business, and not one of them has followed through with it.
Yeah.
And so he said, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time. But if you're willing to do what I'm asking you to do, I'll certainly help you. And so the first thing was reading the book. And then the second thing, I do think that he was wanting to give back too, because I think he had great mentors over the years. And he also wanted to sell some of his real estate. So,
Right.
he was kind of getting it on both fronts there. And I really dove in and become a student of the game. And to your point about mentors, I credit him so much because I don't believe I would have had as much success without a mentor, because when you first do something, you're going to make some mistakes. But if you have a good mentor, that mentor can tell you every mistake that they've made. So you don't make their mistakes. You might make some other mistakes, but it really helps you grow a lot faster because you have that knowledge. And, some of that knowledge you just can't get from a textbook.
Yep. Yeah. And that's something that I preach to everybody looking to do anything, especially real estate, is get a mentor and voraciously read everything you can get your hands on. But I think that combination of both will help really kind of balance it out. Because you're right. There's just, we read tons of books. This guy especially, I think he's read all of them. And there's still these little, blind spots, as being an experienced investor, that like no one talks about it, and
Right.
that's something that even we're, discussing writing a book, just to kind of be very raw and real about like, well, here's like the day to day, so it, and kind of, the spirit of that conversation about the book that we're talking about working on. What inspired you to write your book? Is it like a roadmap, kind of like what you wish you would have read at 18? What is this book?
Yep. So back during COVID, I had several different realtors and investors say, you know what, there's so many new investors trying to do this business, and there's not a lot out there that's going to teach you everything you truly need to know about getting into real estate. And they said, a lot of people want to know what you know. And so it got me thinking, could I put all that together? And that's really what I've done in the book called The New American Dream, A Simple Roadmap to Purchase and Investment Properties. And it starts with what's first things first, because what I started finding out was a lot of people didn't even understand what they needed to do first before they even bought their first property. And that's, create an LLC, create a company, make sure you have your insurance in place, make sure you've done your research, to making sure that, you have a pre-approval letter that creates so much credibility when you start to go look at properties. Because I know with me as an investor, whenever I was selling properties and somebody came and said, hey, I want to buy this property, but they didn't do the right steps up front, it loses credibility for them. And so, nobody wants to show you a bunch of properties and you don't even have a pre-approval letter from a bank. And so it outlines some of that stuff to maintenance and how the rental process works, how to create authentic relationships. To a lot of people don't even think about local municipalities. There's rules almost for everything, especially with codes and ordinances, that most people don't even know about, that you really need to know. And then, in the end is, the real estate side and making sure you're managing it right. And so I thought about the book that I read from Russell Whitney that really outlined everything. And that's what I wanted to bring to the table for the next generation kind of getting into this business, because so many people want to do it, but they don't have what they need to be successful. And that's kind of what I've learned over the last several years. Even, whenever I'm selling properties, that, if you don't have the right realtor, I always tell people there's multiple different types of realtors out there. There's investor realtors, there's realtors that's going to sell middle class single family homes. There's investors going to sell commercial. There's or realtors that's going to sell luxury properties. And so it's the same way with a doctor. You don't want a brain surgeon operating on your knee.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't work out very well. And so that's just things that I've learned over the years that a lot of people don't think about. Right. I know when I first got in this business, to me, a realtor was a realtor.
Right.
But 10 years in, that's just certainly not the case. And so that's what really inspired me to write the book was to be able to give people that information.
Fun fact, the term realtor is trademarked by NAR. I just learned that in the lawsuit. Yeah.
Real estate agent.
I know. So, so I wanted to go back to, you said you met a mentor and then now you have 300 units. That's a big, leap. So did this guy finance properties to you, like seller finance them? Because if you didn't have even any money, how did you get into the first deal?
Right. So, I didn't have any money whatsoever. I was still living at home because at the end of the day, making $45,000 a year after I still own payments and, just general expenses, I didn't have a lot left over at the end of the year. And so when I met this mentor, he said, I told him, I said, Joel, I feel like there's two things you got to have to get into real estate. You got to be well connected. You got to have money. And I still remember him saying, you don't need either one of those. You need to know a few people, but you don't have to be well connected. You don't need any money to get into the business. And none of that necessarily made a ton of sense to me until we really got into it. And how I financed the first deal, he didn't finance anything for me. He said, hey, here's the properties I'll sell to you, but I have bankers that I can introduce you to. And it was local community banks. It wasn't these huge banks that you're just a number two. These are banks that you go in and you talk to the president or vice president of the bank, and it's a handshake. And so very kind of old school. I mean, obviously they still wanted to check out and make sure what I was telling them was accurate, but they financed that dream. And so, like I said earlier, I didn't have any of my own money. And so there was a credit card that allowed you to take a cash advance off of. Now, don't get me wrong, the credit card then was about 7% interest. Today it's in the mid 20s. So it doesn't make as much sense to use it today. But I took a cash advance off a credit card for my down payment on the first two properties I ever bought because I didn't have their own money. And the bank was fine with that. And what I did was my strategy was buying the worst house on the block and making it the best. And because if you buy the best house on the block, there's not a ton of upside to it. Somebody else is already profiting off of all the repairs and everything like that was done to it. Where if you buy the worst house on the block, you buy for pennies on the dollar, you fix it up pennies on the dollar, and now you have a good investment in a good cash flow and you have good equity in it. And what I did was once I fixed it up, I took it straight back to the bank and refinanced it. And so I was able to pull my working capital right back out, pay the credit card off, and had enough money to roll into the next property. And I have done that time after time after time, hundreds of times at this point, where I tell people I don't even have any of my own money tied up in it, because I started with the bank's money. I started with credit cards money. And so that's really how I was able to grow the business that I have today.
That's amazing. So you had negative money and then you built 300 unit portfolio that you own.
Yep.
That is probably one of the coolest stories. That's like right there. That's the title.
Negative 75K to 300 homes in 10.
Now, what were some of the bullet points? I'm a big philosophy guy, and I've recently been coaching people on how to do this as well. And I've noticed the same sticking points. No one wants to do the work. And so, a lot of the way that I tell people to start is, I was like, before we start, let's just have you read your stat poor dad. Read that and then talk to me. Very few people come back to me and say, hey, I read it. What's next? Cool. At least we got that out of the way. But point is it's so important to have a powerful why, because to pull out that much that's unleveraged debt and risk it all on this, you basically bet on yourself. What was going on in your heart, in your mind to allow you? Because everyone can listen to this and be inspired and think, well, I'm going to go do that tomorrow. No one's going to do it. I can just tell you right now, nobody will. And if you're listening right now, you won't do it. So what is it that helped you to cross that bridge? There's a fear bridge that you walked. What was it?
Absolutely. So I think about my time as a kid growing up. And so my parents own a landscaping business, so blue collar workers. And they instilled an entrepreneur mindset to me at a very young age. And so, and they instilled what hard work really gets you. There's a ton of people in this world that think they're going to get rich quick. And it's just not a thing, not unless you win the lottery, right? I mean, that's really the only thing that, that can happen. The odds of that are just so slim to none. And so, my parents always taught me that, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room as long as you outwork everybody in the room, because at the end of the day, especially this business, you can outwork people. If you do what you're supposed to do, you can do that. And so I think about my time as a little kid, and there was a video game on the computer. So, nowadays, people play other kind of video games and they don't go outside and play and that sort of thing. But I remember this one video game that I did. It was called Roller Coaster Typhoon Lagoon. You could create these theme parks. And
I was obsessed with that game, by the way.
Yeah, I loved it. And so it just really, I was like, you know what, like, this is cool to me, and so my parents just continued to instill that in me. And, when I was thinking about getting in the business, I mean, I graduated from High Point University in 2011. It was 2014, 2015-ish before I really started to get into this business. And I was scared half to death. The things that were going through my mind was, what if I couldn't keep the properties rented? Am I going to have enough money to pay the mortgage? What if they tear it up? I mean, all these different things. And so I still remembered, I was like, you know what? There's two different things I can do. I can not do it and just sit here and not do it 10 years from now. That's going to be hard to swallow. Or I can do it and I can lean into being vulnerable. I can lean into the uncomfortable thing, which is also hard. So you get to choose the hard, right? You get to choose, okay, am I going to be vulnerable and it's going to make me a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to get to where I want to be? Or am I just going to stay in my comfort zone and not achieve any dream? Both of those are hard. And I think people don't understand that. I think people say, oh, just because I'm in my comfort zone, it's not hard, but it really is. If you're not doing things that you love to do, I mean, sometimes that makes life very hard. And for me, I'm very results driven. I'm just a driven person. I want to, here's my plan and I want to go execute it. But, back 10 years ago, I never would have dreamed in a million years I would have hundreds of units. I just wanted a secondary income. And it just become almost like a drug. You just got addicted to it. It was just so much fun. And it reminded me of that video game when I was a little kid. And I was pretty good at it. And then you surround yourself with people, especially if you're scared. Just by surrounding yourself with people that have been there before you, those people can help you get over your fears because they've done it before. When I first bought my first property, I think about the fear of that. I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I think I know what I'm doing, but I really didn't looking back on it. But now it doesn't even bother me whenever I spend $500,000 on something like that, of buying properties. But then I was scared half to death. And so I think life is also very about perspective. And so my perspective 10 years ago is certainly different than it is today because I have different experiences. And that's what I would tell people. Lean in to your vulnerability. Surround yourself with people that have been there before you. And if you do the work, if you do the homework, you can get there. It's going to take time. This is not an overnight success. It is a grind. It is going to take work. But you got to be willing to put that, work in.
I think that's the key word. And it's just the unsexy secret, work. And that's something I think whenever we were buying our first triplex, I was super scared. And I was like, it was all the cash savings I had. I was a good saver. But it was every dollar that I had, to my name, which wasn't much, but
it was 20 grand,
20,000. And, but yeah, that was a big bet. And I think what helped me to cross that bridge is I'm similar to yourself, and then I'm just naturally driven. I just kind of have internally a higher bar, a standard, if you will, than where I was at. And I was just willing to just risk and try. And yeah, we were scared. We made mistakes. We were lucky I had a conversation with his friend, our buddy Vivek, in some little dive bar in near Pittsburgh. And he helped kind of answer some questions that I had. And yeah, we were gung ho, but how I got over that risk was I was betting on myself more than anything. I knew that if I lost it all or we made all the mistakes or whatever, the worst case scenario, I knew that I was willing to work and outwork any issue that would arise. And I actually had to. I remember driving out there a few hours away and helping to paint, build fence, manage the team, and whatever I had to do, because we inherited some terrible tenants. We had a meth dealer in one family that just didn't pay in the other, and the middle one was vacant that needed work. And it's like it's the famous first deal, and you learn a lot. But most importantly, you learn a lot about yourself. And
absolutely. And I think I take it a step further than that. Like, I think that when you really start thinking about it, because I bet on myself as well, what people don't realize when they put their money in, just say a 401k or the stock market, they're betting on someone else, because they don't really, you don't necessarily get to, decide whether a stock goes up or stock goes down. And so when I started to think about this, I was like, you know what? I trust myself more than the people running the stock market, right? Because I have zero control over that. But in real estate, I have a lot of control. I get to choose the property I want to buy, the tenants that go in there, the maintenance that's done. I mean, everything you get to control. But don't get me wrong, that is scary too. But I don't think the average person understands, well, I think it's scarier putting it in the stock market and letting somebody else manage it for you. And I just don't think people see that, because the world tells you, hey, 401k or hey, the stock market, it's a great thing. But the world doesn't talk that much about real estate, right? I mean, it's starting to now, but it used to not.
Yeah. And I think for me, I bet in the broad index funds. So I essentially am betting on the U.S. economy. That makes me feel a little better, which I still don't have a lot of faith in. But, they're pumping dollars throughout 2020. I think that's also what drew me to real estate more than anything was I like having that amount of control. And I like knowing that worst case scenario, I need to work 16-hour days and roll up my sleeves. I will, and I have. And I think people see me traveling now, and they see my lifestyle, and that's why I'm getting all these coaching clients lately who don't want to work. I think that's all it was, is I regret one thing, not like posting more on my social media about the grueling grinding days, which I'm trying to do more of. But, everyone just sees all the glamour reel and sees all the fun and the wins. And I had these conversations with people like, no, like it was a struggle. Like, you would not want to have been around me for the first year. I was opening these business. I was starting these real estate. Like I was not in a good place. I was working tireless hours, figuring out systems. You already know, like you're smiling because I can tell you're thinking back like, yeah, there are some nights. And that's the stuff that no one talks about. But that's in every biography I've ever read. I'm a big reader myself. Every biography, they've always had these insane problems, like almost insurmountable, like the Elon Musk of the world. And you read it and you're just like, well, if he can do that, I can at least figure out how to make back 20 grand or whatever, So that's another piece of advice I might give listening is read biographies of these guys, these men, or even women who've trudged that path and created insane success. I guarantee you, if they're honest, they're going to tell you the real, which is you're going to suffer. But if you can suffer now, you're going to win later if you stay with it, applying the fundamentals, surrounding yourself people who've been there before, and just doing the work.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people look to social media for their guidance on that. And people forget that a social media reel is 10, 15, 20 seconds of someone's life. Obviously nobody wants to post about the bad part, right? But,
right.
And I think that's the part that people forget about, that nothing worth in this world that's worth anything comes easy. I mean, it's just not, it takes hard work to get you there.
Yep. Vince, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. So, hey, Steve, I had a question on, the deals that you were doing initially. Are they all SFRs, so single family, 1, 2, 3, 4 units, or did you delve into like a multiplex? Because if you did do the single family, the financing is a lot based on you, so it's very hard to get loans. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So when I first started, it was single family, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. And then once I got up, to probably about 10 units, they started loaning me money based on the business. And so, which was good, because I wanted the business to stand on its own and to be able to use all that rental income. And so the biggest thing is, if you start going to bigger banks, they're going to still base a lot of what they do based off of you as the person or you as your income instead of what the business is bringing in. And so I would really challenge people to find that local hometown bank that will loan based on income potential and what a property is worth and the business instead of just what you're making. Because I would have never got a loan if it was just solely based on me. I was $75,000 in debt, $45,000 a year. My debt to income ratio, when you start looking at what those monthly payments were on my student loans, just didn't make sense for any bank really to probably lend money on me. But the good part is these local hometown banks, they operate a little bit differently. You go to a bigger bank, you're a number. If you go to a smaller bank, they care about you. They might know who your parents are. They might know who your friends are. And people can vouch for you. And sometimes they take a little bit more risk knowing that they're betting on you as a person and they know you're a good person. And as long as you got good credit and a decent, paying job where you could try to float some of it if you had to, makes it a lot easier.
So we're talking credit union, small banks, local banks, like teachers union, is that stuff like that?
Yeah. So I use credit unions. I used local banks. And what I mean by a local bank, they have probably $2 billion worth of assets or lower. I think once you get over kind of that $2 to $3 billion mark, they still say they're a local hometown bank, but they start operating like a bigger bank, and it makes it a little bit harder to do, what they do, because those banks, what people don't realize is a bigger bank is regulated much different than a local hometown bank or a credit union. And so you really have to kind of find that niche. But now there's so many different hard money lenders, private lenders, people willing to do seller financing, the creative financing stuff. There's, I guess that stuff was around a little bit 10 years ago, but it wasn't nearly as readily available as what it is today. And so there's, if you have it all put together, there's certainly financing out there for somebody to be able to finance your dreams.
Okay, that makes sense. I was looking through some of the stuff that you wrote in the book. The first, you have the first things first. You talk about, well, what do you have to do to get ready? But, the next one is like, what's a good deal, right? So when you bought your first deal, or even when you do deals now, there's a lot of people listening, haven't done their first deal or trying to do the next deal in this environment is always tough, right? So what is a good deal to you, and how can you tell our listeners if they're looking now?
Absolutely. For me, it's all about the numbers. And so a lot of people get caught up on interest rates. For me, I've never worried about what an interest rate was as long as the numbers still made sense. Because this is the way I view real estate. There's nothing else in the world like it. Somebody funds it for you. So the bank funds it for you. Your tenant pays the mortgage. You make money every single month, and it appreciates over time. And so there's nothing else in this world that allows you to do that. And if you get hung up on the interest rates, which a lot of people have, when they're 8, 9%, you'll never get in this business. So for me, it's all about the numbers. And how you still can make profit, even in today's market, is finding the worst house on the block. And so if you go and you buy the best house on the block, you're going to overpay for it. Someone else is going to make all the money. And then these bigger interest rates are going to affect that deal. Where if you buy the worst house on the block, you go in, you do your sweat equity, you're able to do the work pennies on the dollar, you're going to have less money tied up in it, which then that kind of offsets where the interest rates are today, and it still allows you to get into the business. And so really how I start evaluating that is, what's the property worth right now? What's the property worth when I fix it up? How much money am I going to have in fixing it up? And what can I rent it for? And so if, just for nice round numbers, if it's $100,000 property fixed up, that's what my loan's going to be. And I could only rent it for $500 a month. Well, that's not going to cover the payment. But if I got $100,000 property and it rents for $1,500 to $2,000 a month, well, then I start subtracting out payment, taxes, insurance, and I'm somewhere between 25, 30%. I normally try to be pretty conservative about what the maintenance expenses are going to be. And when I first got in this business, I wanted to clear $300 a unit. Now, if I was getting in this business, it would be probably a little bit less just because everything costs so much more now. There again, it depends on what market you're in as well. And so I always try to run numbers conservatively where if I'm in a down market, I'm still going to make money. So for instance, if you got in this business, 3 years ago, you might have got a 4% interest rate. And if you base your decision on buying that property off a 4% interest rate, and then you had to refinance it at 8%, you might not be making anything. You might be going in the hole every single month. And so what I tried to do is, yes, I might have been able to get a 4% interest rate today, but I tried to prepare myself for the current market. I tried to prepare, okay, if my rents went down, if the interest rates went up, can it still cash flow? Because I wanted to make sure it still cash flow no matter what the market was. And I think a lot of people forget that. They look at real estate for what it's going to get them today. And rental property is not a today thing. It's a 10, 15, 20 years down the road thing where it appreciates over time. Your rents go up over time, but also your markets change so much over time as well. And so you always have to make sure that in a bad market, you're still going to be okay. And I think that's one of the things that people forget about. They forget about, well, you know what? There's a future, and history always repeats itself, right? So, at some point there's going to be higher interest rates. At some point there's going to be lower interest rates. But I think if you do that homework up front and prepare for worst case scenario, it will always cash flow.
I'm kind of curious as to the markets that you got involved in initially. What were some of those states, cities, municipalities?
Have you thought about investing in real estate and taking advantage of all of those benefits without any of the work? That is something that OnV Invest not only provides, but has been providing since its inception. With friends and family, we have built an empire in a system of a wealth generating tool that is giving us and our friends and family that leverage in their life to create true wealth. Go to onvinvest.com for more to see if you qualify. And thanks for listening.
Yep. So I solely in North Carolina. I was in 3 different counties, Alamance, Guilford, and Rockingham, and all 3 counties were way different. And so Rockingham County is up closer to the Virginia, North Carolina border. It's still kind of behind times a little bit. If you go up there, the towns still look like you're in the 60s and 70s, and where Greensboro is much more in with times, and Alamance County is starting to get more within times because we're actually between Charlotte and Raleigh. And so Charlotte and Raleigh are booming. People are buying $2 million homes, demoing them, building a $4 million home, selling it for $6 million. I mean, it's just crazy what's going on in those markets. And so a lot of people can't afford those markets. And so they're starting to migrate this way. And so our market, certainly in Alamance County and Guilford County, are much better, but they were all different. And so tax rates were different. Tax rates in Rockingham are one of the lowest in the state, and Guilford County are one of the highest in the state. And so it's just the demographic of people that live there were much different as well. And so you got to take kind of into account all of that stuff. The same, all the rents in all 3 counties were probably within $100 to $200 of each other. But a property in Rockingham County was pennies on the dollar compared to what I paid for in Alamance and Guilford. And so you have to kind of evaluate that individually. It's not a one size fits all strategy by any means.
And there was pretty good appreciation happening when you were investing there?
Yeah. So just in the last 2 years, property values have doubled here in Central North Carolina. And a lot of it's the supply and demand kind of coming from Raleigh, coming from Charlotte. And so many people want to live in North Carolina right now. And so before COVID, it was kind of that standard, 2 to 3%. And then it's like somebody went over and turned the light switch on, and it seemed like it doubled overnight. It's kind of what it felt like. But it's certainly booming right now.
What were some of the initial mistakes that you made as we all can probably relate to as investors. What were some of those? What were maybe some of those things that you might do different in the initial stages?
Yeah, I talk about this in the book that anytime you do something new, you want to sprint out of the gate, right? You want to go 100 miles an hour and just get it done and grow the business as fast as you can. And I wish I would have known, hey, slow it down a little bit. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so, I think you can get burnt out very quickly doing that. I think you can make some mistakes doing that. Especially if you don't have the first things first identified and in place. Do it methodically, do it slow but steady. My dad still has this saying, slow and steady still gets you there. And I think that, if you just run out of the gate, you're missing some of the things you might need to notice. And I think number 2 is leave your heart at the door. And so I think this was one of the hardest things for me, being a landlord and owning properties. A little bit easier to this day because I have a management company that I own that manages it, and I'm able to kind of step more away. But when I first got in this business, you will get every excuse under the sun on why somebody can't pay rent. From somebody passed away to, hey, I lost my job or got laid off, or I even had a lady that went down to a sweepstakes business and put her rent and lost it in 20 minutes and couldn't pay her rent. She was bawling. And I tell people all this, that everybody has a story. And this is why I say you got to leave the emotion out of it. Leave that at the door. For me, this is a business. And so we can be compassionate about people. We can feel for them. But at the end of the day, we have to make business decisions because guess what? You still have to pay your bills, right? And so I have a mentality now, and I wish I would have had this a little bit sooner. But my mentor told me, he said, hey, if somebody doesn't pay you rent, they're stealing money from you. He said, it's no different than a convenience store. Somebody goes in there and gets a Coke off the shelf, starts drinking it, walks out the door. They just paid for a service. They just paid for an item, they just took an item. They didn't pay for it. And it's no different than somebody living in a rental unit and not paying rent, or living in a rental unit and tearing the unit up. And so luckily I can turn that switch on and off most of the time because I am a pretty nice guy. I think I am. And, I care for people, but at the end of the day, this is a business. And I think that is one of the hardest things that people struggle with. I told people all the time, and they're like, well, I feel bad for them. And I said, well, are you going to feel bad for them when you can't make your mortgage payment, or you can't pay your maintenance people to do maintenance, or you have to give the property back, to the bank? Do you feel bad for them anymore? And they said, well, no, I would actually feel bad like that I did that. I said, well, there you go. You got to hold people accountable to the contract that they signed. You have an obligation, they have an obligation. And I think a lot of people forget about that, that this is a business. You can be compassionate all day long, but at the end of the day, I have this saying, you got to pay to stay. And, if you don't do that, there's nothing I can do for you. It's not my fault I'm having to evict you. It's not my fault that you tore a property up. I just have to hold you accountable for it. And I think a lot of people forget that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people struggle with is that part. Yeah. And then having certain things in place, it's that old saying, don't put the cart before the horse, make sure you have everything in place because, and prepare for situations before they happen. And so for me, I talk about this in the book, I prepared for different things, if I had a house fire, if a tree fell on the house, if, all this different stuff. Sometimes it took me preparing for that when it actually happened. I've had a house fire. I've had a tree fall on a house before. But if I would have actually thought about those things and how I would have handled them beforehand, in the moment, you're very emotional about it, right? Oh, my house is on fire. Somebody could be hurt. But if you already have in place how you would handle some of those situations, it makes it a little bit better because you're not coming up with those solutions when emotions are high. You're coming up with those solutions when you're level-headed. And so those are just, 3 things there's certainly more than that in the book that I would really, make sure you're prepared for.
Those are great points. And those are all in the book, like you were saying?
Yes.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds like a great read. I definitely can relate. We just had a tree fall in one of our homes and got the message, got the photos from the current tenant. Luckily, nobody was hurt. It wasn't that big of a hole in the roof. But tree came through the window, glass shattered, roof, caved in a little bit. We had some crazy winds and storms up there. And I was literally emotionless about it. Not because I didn't care. Of course, I was like, hey, make sure everyone's safe. But it was just, that was a Tuesday for me. And I think that comes with age, wisdom, and experience. It's just like, we'll handle it. We'll send our guy. Glad you're all okay. Well, of course, it was like a step by step for me. And I think there's a lot of people who get into their own business or into real estate tend to be very emotional. And that's what messes you up. I find the most successful people, I always read between the lines. They tend to not be emotionless, but to be very just like, they just drink it all in. They let it process. And I've really taken that kind of behavior, as much as I can, even if I have like something crazy come up. I have another business where if somebody comes at me with an ask, with a pay raise, with an issue, if I know I can have a 24-hour period to think and simmer, consider, I will take it every time. To remove the emotions out of the equation is huge. And I think that's a key tenet to being successful in anything. So thank you for sharing. Wow.
Absolutely.
Great points.
We're actually going to be recording another episode, just Drew and I. It's going to be about squatter rights.
Yeah.
And I am going to rant for 2 hours straight. It is going to be insane. Did you guys, I don't know if you know, but they just killed a lady, the squatters in New York. They just broke in and was squatting and she came, 52-year-old single lady. They just murdered her and put her in a bag. Now, New York is now filing a bill to get rid of squatter rights. Florida just passed something saying property owners' rights. Georgia is having something saying sheriffs can come and throw you out. Wow. I think the states are going to start. Once you start murdering people, that's when they go.
Who murdered who in this?
The squatters murdered the owner and then put her in a bag.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man.
Whoa.
I've had...
rights. What for?
Yeah, it's crazy how, people that break the law have more rights than landlords. And I've said this a lot over the 10 years that tenants have more rights than landlords too, it seems like, depending on where you live at. But
hopefully not in where you are.
I was going to say, how is that in you said North Carolina, correct?
Yep. North Carolina. It's pretty good for the most part. I've ran into a few squatters that had only been there a little bit. But in North Carolina, how you establish residence, if you get mail and you turn on just one utility, they classify you as a residence. And so luckily I haven't had a ton of issues with this, but I did have one person. I had just bought the property. Somebody moved in, had their mail go into the house and turn the water and power on, and I had to evict them. And I'm like, that's just, and this was 8 years ago. I haven't had the issue since, but I was like, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why in the world that somebody that broke into the house has a right to stay there just doesn't make any sense. But for the most part, North Carolina is pretty good. When it comes to, lost rent and stuff like that, it's one of those things you kind of know you're probably not going to get your money back. And so we always have a pretty strict process in place. Rent's due on the 1st, late by the 5th. We're filing somewhere between the 10th and the 15th. Doesn't matter what story you give us. And we have a good routine in place where we're following up with rental units that might be vacant that we're turning just to make sure somebody hadn't moved in. Because if you catch it fast enough, they can't get some of that stuff in place fast enough. But I'm glad I'm not in New York, in some of these other places, in other countries, because I do think squatters have way more rights than the actual property.
I think it's the state of Washington. Christian, we interviewed him. He was on the podcast. He was saying that the state will give the squatter a free lawyer to help him squat for longer. So the taxpayers are paying for the squatter with the lawyer, and they're doing all the tricks to see how much we can scam the landlords. That's literally a real thing. That is insane.
I want to say this was in California. Wasn't there someone that got away with quite a bit? I mean, they squatted for over a year, I think it was.
Yeah. So what happened was she was in LA and she moved into a Airbnb and then decided not to leave. And apparently the ADU was not permitted. So she found a loophole. So they couldn't evict her. But I think she was all over the news. I think she left because her name was out and I think she was not getting jobs. Like she's pretty much done.
Man.
Good luck with that.
And maybe this is a different one, but she found that loophole and they actually tried to go in and remedy said loophole.
She won't let them in.
And she wouldn't let them in. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
That's a new scam, man. Yeah.
She had a lawyer.
We talk, speaking on emotions, it'll be hard for us not to get emotional and for especially Vince to rant because the majority of our portfolio is in California where there's, such thing as squatter rights. And yeah, we've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the course of 5, almost 6 years of investing in real estate just because of squatter rights. And so we speak very passionately about it. Something that, if I can turn the tables back to me on what I would do different, I would not invest in blue states straight up. And I'm not a politics guy. Like I don't care, but any state that, is more on the landlord friendly side, that's a huge advantage. So
basically every state though, you might not know this, has squatter rights.
To different degrees for sure. Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah.
But it is good though. We'll talk about it in the next episode. But hey, so I want to wrap up, but I wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions. It's, we've been in the business for 6 years and we've probably made $0.000 in cash flow, right? So if you don't have money, and you bought your first deal on a credit card, how are you constantly buying deals if you're not raising capital? Because I know for a fact cash flow is not enough for you to buy 300 homes. Like that's not. So what is the trick there?
Yep. So, it goes back to that first deal. And so bought the first property, worst house on the block, put some money in, was able to refinance it, pull some money back out. And then I was able to roll that in to the next deal. And so I've just done that hundreds of times. And so I'm not utilizing any of the money that I'm making on rent to actually buy more property. I'm still utilizing the bank's money that I continue to roll to property because I've gotten such a good deal on properties. And you can still get those deals to this day. You just got to buy the worst house on the block. And so kind of how you do that, you can ride around neighborhoods. You can look on foreclosure lists, because what people don't realize, just having it here in Burlington, where one of my properties or some of my properties are, they can condemn a house just by having a clogged up sewer line. And so some of the properties that are on a condemn list have very minor stuff that needs to be done to it. And so, I tell people, as long as you can see a vision and look past it, you can still get a good deal. But that's what I do. I don't utilize any rent or anything like that to buy more properties. That's the stuff to operate the business and to make money. And there again, most of my properties, I'm at least getting $300 a unit clearing after payment taxes and insurance. Some of them are a little bit less if I bought them here in the last couple of years, but that's why I always want to make sure I have a good margin in there.
Oh, so you're buying it really under market value and you're putting in some sweat equity and you're able to pull out a cash refinance at, 65, 70 LTV, something like that. So you're getting the spread. So you're pulling out the money. But even if you did that, you're doing that 30 times a year for 10 years straight. That is insane.
Yep.
I've never met anyone who's done that. That is crazy.
Who is your contractor and what's his cell phone number? That's fine. But so there's a lot that's happening that if you're not an investor that, we're leaving out because we might be making it, you're definitely making it sound easy and it definitely wasn't, I'm sure.
And
but
I
want to emphasize the only way he's able to pull that off is, of course, running his numbers. You're running numbers very, very tight, very conservatively, which is smart. Your market, right? This is like your home essentially. And therefore, because it's your home, you're able to leverage the most important, I think, of all these factors, which is relationships. Sure, you've got teams on teams to help with all those things. And that's where you're able to have a nice, comfortable, relaxed conversation and not have to deal with all the fires that are happening right now in real time in a 300 unit portfolio. I guarantee you there's a fire happening that he's just not having to deal with because the relationships. And that's, I think you refer to it back with the credit unions and stuff as well. It's a great tip. So, yeah.
Yep. And I will say this with the bankers, one banker is not going to be able to finance that many properties in 1 year. And so have a network of bankers where if one banker tells you no, or, hey, you know what, we've reached our max of loaning for this year, or, hey, we've reached our max of duplexes for this year, you can go to a different banker. And so that's what I have. I have a network of different bankers that can do deals. And so then it allows you to work multiple deals at one time where you can really kind of stream things together.
Love it. Awesome, man. Well, we've taken up, went over the 45-minute mark as we had discussed. Sure, you're busy. Love to always kind of get recommendations. So you've got a new book out. What other book might you recommend as well that would help somebody on their journey to achieve what you've achieved?
Absolutely. So I would recommend my book, The New American Dream. I would also recommend the book that I initially read when I first got in this business because it is still so relevant to this day. It's called Building Wealth by Russell Whitney. It's a good one. It talks about the same things that I talk about, but it goes into how you really transfer the money from property to property. And you don't want to go out and buy a shiny boat or a shiny new car with the money that you just cashed out from a bank. You want to put that back into an appreciating asset that's going to continue to make you money. So, I think with having both of those, it really allows you to, really lay the groundwork, for what you need.
Awesome. And then I like to end this one with, here's a good one. What is the best and worst part about being you?
Man, that's a tough one. I think the probably the worst part. People think that real estate is passive income to no end. And when you're growing a business, it's not as passive as what social media leads on to believe. And so I think it's always a grind, so whatever your dreams are and whatever dreams you're going about, I think the hard part, I would say, would be to continue that grind every single day to reach the goals, because you're going to hit something where somebody's going to tell you no, or you feel like you're going to fail or whatnot, but to continue to push through that. And, that's the hard part about what I do is, as I continue to grow, as I help people to hear those stories, but, put them back in a positive light. But even being in this business 10 years, sometimes I feel the same way. We're all human, right? But I say the best thing about me is what I've created, that helps my family out. So I was able to get my parents in this business. I was able to get my brother in this business, and this business has positively changed our life for the better. I think about what it brings to the table. I'm able to go see friends when I want to, when they have kids, or soccer games, family events. It gives you the freedom that you're looking for if you do it the right way. And I truly believe that, I have a saying that, I don't live to work. I work to live. And so everything that I do on a daily basis is to improve my life and improve my family's life, where we can continue to live the way we want to live. And it's less about the money. It's less about what I accumulate, but more about the memories. Because at the end of the day, when our time's over on this earth, it's not like you get to carry it with you. So it's really, from now to X date that you're on this earth, and it's about the journey in between it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Love it. And so how can listeners find your book? How can they get their hands on it? How can I read it?
Absolutely. So it's on Amazon. Go to Amazon.com, search The New American Dream by Stephen Andrews. You can get it there. You can also go to my consulting website, soarx.consulting.com. That's SOARX consulting.com. I also have some links on there and some other stuff on the website as well that can also help people out.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Vince, any final thoughts?
No, that's it, man. Thanks. Do you have a IG, Instagram page or anything people can
Yes,
follow
you can search IG or Facebook. Just type in Sorex Consulting, and I'll pop up.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I definitely like to see 5-star reviews on any service or any product before I purchase. Please take a second to leave us a 5-star review, whether you're listening to it on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, or whatever platform. Take a second, goes a long way, helps us a lot to grow the channel, and thanks for listening.